Captain Jake Morrison stood at the viewing window of the UES Frontier, watching as the massive space station grew larger in front of them. Kepler Station looked like a giant silver wheel spinning slowly against the black backdrop of space. Lights flickered along its surface like tiny stars, and ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it, like insects around a bright lamp. "First time seeing aliens up close, Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Carter as she walked up beside him. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that Jake understood completely. They were about to make history as the first humans to officially meet with the galactic community. "Not just seeing them, Amy. We're going to sit down and talk with them like equals," Jake replied, adjusting his dress uniform one more time. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and calloused hands that showed years of hard work. His brown hair was cut short in military style, and his green eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had seen both good times and bad. The bridge doors opened with a soft hiss, and Sergeant Pete Williams entered carrying a datapad. Pete was built like a brick wall, with arms that looked like they could bend steel bars. His black hair was starting to show gray at the temples, and his face bore several small scars from his years in combat zones. "Sir, we're getting docking." "Instructions from Station Control," Pete said, handing the pad to Jake. "They want us to dock at Bay 7. Also, they're sending some kind of welcome committee to meet us." Jake nodded and looked at the information on the screen. The alien writing looked like flowing water mixed with sharp angles. Below it was a rough translation that their computer had managed to piece together. Dr. Lisa Brooks joined them from her lab, wiping her hands on a towel. She was a small woman with bright blue eyes and blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her lab coat was stained with various chemicals, and she looked tired but excited. "I've been studying the biological data we have on the Zephyrians," she said, pulling up images on her portable screen. "They're fascinating creatures. Their bodies are made of something like living crystal, and they don't have muscles the way we do. They move using electrical fields generated inside their bodies." "Are they dangerous?" Pete asked, his hand automatically moving toward where his weapon would normally be. For this mission, they had all agreed to go unarmed as a sign of peaceful intentions. "Not physically," Lisa replied. "From what I can tell, they couldn't hurt a human child if they tried. Their homeworld has very low gravity and no large predators. They've never had to fight for survival the way humans did on Earth." Jake studied the images of the Zephyrians. They looked like walking sculptures made of clear blue crystal, tall and thin with long arms that ended in delicate fingers. Their faces were smooth and angular, with large eyes that glowed with soft light. "They look beautiful," Amy said softly. "They are," Lisa agreed. "But remember, they've been part of galactic civilization for over 1,000 years. They consider themselves highly advanced and sophisticated. From what our scouts have reported, they think humans are primitive newcomers who barely deserve to be noticed." The ship shuddered slightly as the docking clamps engaged with the station. Through the window, Jake could see alien workers moving around the docking bay. They wore environmental suits, but he could still make out their strange shapes and movements. "All right, people," Jake said, straightening his shoulders. "This is what we came for. Remember, we represent all of humanity today. Let's show them that humans can be just as civilized as anyone else in the galaxy." The docking bay was larger than Jake had expected. The ceiling stretched high above them, and the walls were covered with symbols and lights that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. The air smelled strange, like ozone mixed with something floral that made his nose itch slightly. A group of aliens waited for them near the airlock. Jake recognized them as Zephyrians from Lisa's briefings, but seeing them in person was different. They seemed to glow from within, and their movements were so smooth they appeared to be dancing rather than walking. The tallest of them stepped forward. His crystal body was a deeper blue than the others, and intricate patterns of light moved beneath his surface like slow lightning. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Council," the alien said. His voice came from speakers built into his suit rather than from a mouth, and it sounded like wind chimes mixed with electronic tones. "You are the humans from the third planet of the Sol system." "That's right," Jake replied, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Government. This is my crew, Lieutenant Carter, Sergeant Williams, and Dr. Brooks." Veltar looked at Jake's extended hand for a long moment before touching it briefly with one crystalline finger. The contact was cold and sent a small electrical shock up Jake's arm. "We will escort you to the council chambers," Veltar said, already turning away. "Please follow, and do not touch anything. This station contains technology that your species might find overwhelming." As they walked through the corridors, Jake noticed other aliens stopping to stare at them. Some looked curious, others seemed frightened, and a few appeared disgusted. The humans were clearly different from anything else on the station. "Your bone structure is very dense," one of the Zephyrians commented to Lisa as they walked. "And your muscle mass is excessive. Are all humans built for such heavy gravity?" "Earth gravity is about average for inhabited worlds," Lisa replied politely. "We've adapted to our environment, just like everyone else." "Average?" another Zephyrian asked, his lights flickering in what might have been surprise. "Our homeworld has gravity 1/3 that of yours. We consider it quite comfortable." Jake noticed Pete's jaw tightening at the alien's tone. They weren't trying to be rude, but their comments felt like insults. Everything about the way they spoke suggested they thought humans were clumsy, overbuilt, and primitive. The council chamber was a large circular room with a domed ceiling that showed images of space. Seats were arranged in rings around a central area, and most of them were occupied by different types of aliens. Jake saw creatures that looked like walking plants, others that seemed to be made of metal and wires, and some that defied easy description. The humans wished to establish trade relations and cultural exchange, Veltar announced to the assembled crowd. They claimed to represent a unified government from their homeworld. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the chamber. Jake felt his temper starting to rise, but kept his expression neutral. "We understand you've recently developed faster-than-light travel," said another Zephyrian from the council. "Most species require several thousand years to master such technology after achieving spaceflight. You've done it in less than a century. Quite impressive for such a young race." "We're fast learners," Jake replied evenly. "Indeed, perhaps too fast," Veltar said, his lights pulsing in a pattern that somehow conveyed disapproval. "Rapid technological development without corresponding social evolution can be dangerous. Your species still engages in warfare among yourselves, does it not?" "We've had our conflicts," Jake admitted, "but we're working toward peace." "Working toward it," Veltar repeated. "Yes, we've observed your species' tendency toward violence. Your entertainment media is filled with stories of combat and conflict. Your sports involve physical confrontation. Even your children's games often simulate warfare." Jake felt his crew tense beside him. The alien's words were technically accurate, but the way he said them made it sound like humans were nothing but violent savages. "We also create art, music, and literature," Amy said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We explore space to learn and discover, not to conquer." "Of course," Veltar said in a tone that suggested he didn't believe her. "However, given your species' physical characteristics and behavioral patterns, we believe you might be better suited for certain types of work within our galactic community." "What kind of work?" Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew. The answer: manual labor, mostly. Your dense bones and excessive musculature would be advantageous for tasks requiring physical strength. Many civilized species find such work beneath them. The insult was clear now. They wanted humans to be their laborers, their muscle, while the civilized species handled the important work of thinking and planning. Jake looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens. Most of them were nodding in agreement with Veltar's words. They had already decided what humanity's place in their society would be, and it wasn't as equals. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Jake said carefully. "We didn't come here looking for work. We came here as representatives of a sovereign government, hoping to establish diplomatic relations between equals." Equals? Veltar's lights flickered in what was clearly amusement. "Captain Morrison, your species has barely left its own solar system. You have no understanding of galactic civilization, no knowledge of advanced sciences, and no control over your own violent impulses. In what way do you consider yourselves our equals?" The chamber fell silent, waiting for Jake's response. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. His next words would determine how the galaxy saw humanity for generations to come. Jake took a deep breath and looked directly at Ambassador Veltar. The crystalline alien's lights pulsed with what seemed like smug satisfaction, waiting for the human to back down or admit his species' inferiority. "You want to know how we consider ourselves your equals?" Jake said, his voice calm, but carrying an edge that made several nearby aliens shift uncomfortably. "We survived on a world that would kill most of you within hours. We built cities, created art, and reached for the stars, despite having everything try to stop us. We didn't evolve in safe gardens like most species here. We earned our place through blood, sweat, and determination." Veltar's lights flickered rapidly, and Jake could sense disapproval radiating from the alien council. A creature that looked like a walking tree with silver bark leaned forward in its seat. "Primitive aggression," it said in a voice like rustling leaves. "This only proves our point about human nature." "Does it?" Jake asked. "Or does it prove that you've all grown soft in your comfortable worlds? When was the last time any of you faced real danger? When did you last have to fight for anything that mattered?" The chamber erupted in angry chittering, electronic buzzing, and other alien sounds of outrage. Veltar raised one crystalline hand, and the noise gradually died down. "Your words show exactly why humans are not ready for civilized society," Veltar said. "You speak of fighting and danger as if they were virtues. We have evolved beyond such crude necessities." "Have you?" Jake challenged. "Or have you just been lucky enough to avoid them?" Veltar's inner lights began pulsing faster, and Jake could tell the alien was getting angry. Good. Angry beings made mistakes, and Jake was counting on that. "Perhaps," Veltar said slowly, "a demonstration is in order. Each species represented on this station maintains certain assets for both entertainment and protection. Since humans seem to value physical prowess so highly, would you be willing to prove your species' capabilities in a more direct manner?" Amy grabbed Jake's arm. "Captain, don't," she whispered urgently. "This is obviously a trap." But Jake could see the opportunity. These aliens had already decided humans were nothing but dumb muscle. If he could prove them wrong, it would change everything. If he failed, well, at least he'd fail on his own terms. What kind of demonstration? Jake asked. Veltar's lights now pulsed with what could only be described as malicious glee. Each species maintains combat creatures from their homeworlds. They serve as both guardians and as tests of worthiness. We propose that a human face our champion in the arena of proving. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of the station system seemed to quiet down. Dr. Brooks stepped closer to Jake. "Captain, this is insane," she whispered. We don't know anything about their combat creatures. This could be a death sentence. What are the terms? Jake asked, ignoring his crew's worried looks. Simple, Veltar replied. 1 human against our alpha beast. Victory proves your species has some value. Defeat ... He paused, his lights dimming slightly. Defeat would demonstrate that humans are not ready for galactic society. And if we refuse? Amy asked. Then you. Return to your little world and do not bother us again for at least a century, said the tree-like alien. Plenty of time for your species to mature, if it survives that long. Jake looked around the chamber. Every alien eye, sensor, or optical organ was focused on him. He could feel the weight of their expectations. They wanted him to refuse. They wanted to dismiss humanity without having to deal with the complications of accepting them as equals. I accept, Jake said. Pete stepped forward immediately. Sir, let me do this. Untrained for combat, you're needed here for the negotiations. No. Pete, this isn't about combat training. It's about what we represent. Jake turned back to Veltar. When do we do this? Immediately, Veltar said, rising from his seat. The arena of proving is always ready. We will gather there in 1 hour. As the aliens began filing out of the chamber, chattering excitedly. Among themselves, Jake's crew surrounded him. This is suicide, Captain, Lisa said bluntly. We don't know what we're dealing with here. I need everything you can find out about their alpha beast, Jake told her. 1 hour isn't much, but it's something. Sir, Amy said, even if you somehow win this, what's to stop them from just making up more tests? They obviously don't want. US here. Then we make sure they can't dismiss us after this, Jake replied. Win or lose, we make an impression they won't forget. The next hour passed quickly. Lisa worked frantically to analyze any available data about Zephyrian wildlife, while Amy tried to learn more about the arena of proving from the station's computer systems. Pete paced like a caged animal, clearly unhappy about not being able to help directly. I found something, Lisa said, pulling up holographic images on her portable display. The Alpha Beast is from the Zephyrian homeworld's northern continent. It's their apex predator, the only creature on their planet that actively hunts other large animals. Jake studied the images. The creature looked like a nightmare combination of a bear and a tiger, but scaled up to massive proportions. It stood, at least 12 feet tall at the shoulder, with claws that looked like curved swords and teeth designed for tearing flesh. How much does it weigh? Jake asked. The data suggests around 2,000 pounds, Lisa replied. Its hide is naturally armored, thick enough to stop most conventional weapons. Its bite force is estimated at over 4,000 pounds per square inch. Anything else cheerful you'd like to share? Pete asked sarcastically. Actually, yes, Lisa said, her voice getting excited. Look at its bone structure and muscle placement. This creature evolved on a low-gravity world with no real competition. It's big and strong, but it's not built for prolonged fights. It's an ambush predator that relies on overwhelming force to kill quickly. What does that mean for the captain? Amy asked. It means it's not used to prey that fights back effectively, Jake said, understanding what Lisa was getting at. On Earth, our predators had to deal with prey that could run, hide, fight, or work together. This thing has probably never faced anything that could match its strength or outsmart it. You're not as strong as it is, Captain, Pete pointed out. No, but I'm smarter, faster, and I know how to fight dirty, Jake replied. Earth predators taught us that size isn't everything. A soft chime indicated it was time to go. As they walked through the station corridors toward the arena, Jake noticed that word had spread quickly. Aliens of all descriptions were heading in the same direction, clearly excited to witness what they expected be a brief and fatal encounter. The arena of proving was larger than Jake had imagined. It was a vast circular chamber with walls that rose up in tiers, providing seating for thousands of spectators. The floor was covered with artificial terrain, including rocks, small hills, and what looked like artificial trees and bushes. Arena can simulate different environments, Veltar explained as he led them to the preparation area. Today, it will represent a section of our homeworld's wilderness, where the alpha beast naturally hunts. Jake nodded, studying the layout. The varied terrain would actually work in his favor. The beast might be stronger, but he could use the environment to even the odds. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Veltar asked. There is no shame in admitting that your species is not ready for this challenge. I'm ready, Jake said simply. Very. Well, you may use any equipment you can carry, any weapons your technology can provide. Jake began removing his uniform jacket. I won't need them. The alien's lights flickered in confusion. You intend to face the alpha beast unarmed? That's right, Jake said, rolling up his sleeves. You want to see what humans are really capable of? Then let me show you what we can do with just what nature gave us. The spectator sections were filling rapidly. Jake could see his crew in the front row, their faces tense with worry. Amy was recording everything, knowing that win or lose, this moment would be remembered. A deep rumbling sound echoed through the arena, and Jake felt the hair on his arms stand up. Somewhere in the maze of artificial terrain, the alpha beast was waiting. The rules are simple, Veltar announced to the crowd. Combat continues until one participant is dead or completely unable to continue. There are no other restrictions. Jake stepped through the gate into the arena proper. The artificial ground felt strange under his feet, slightly spongy and covered with what looked like purple grass. The air smelled of ozone and something organic that made his primitive brain whisper warnings. Behind him, he heard the gate seal shut with a solid thunk. Another roar echoed through the arena, closer this time. Jake could hear heavy footsteps moving through the artificial brush, and he knew the alpha beast had caught his scent dot in the spectator stands. Thousands of aliens fell silent, waiting to see how quickly the primitive human would die. Jake smiled grimly and began to move deeper into the arena. It was time to show the galaxy what humans could really do. Jake moved slowly through the artificial forest, his senses alert to every sound and smell around him. The purple grass beneath his feet made soft crunching sounds, and the fake trees creaked in the artificial breeze that circulated through the arena. Somewhere ahead of him, the alpha beast was hunting. He could hear it moving through the brush, its massive weight breaking branches and crushing the strange plants under its feet. The creature wasn't trying to be quiet. Why would it? On its homeworld, nothing had ever been a real threat to it. Jake found a small clearing and stopped, crouching down to examine the ground. There, pressed deep into the soft earth, was a paw, print the size of a dinner plate. The claw marks extended several inches beyond the pad, and the depth of the impression told him the creature was even heavier than Dr. Brooks had estimated. A low growl rumbled through the arena, and Jake felt the sound in his chest. The alpha beast was close now, probably circling around to get downwind of him. Jake smiled grimly. The creature was smart enough to use basic hunting tactics, but it had never faced prey that understood those same tactics. In the spectator stands, thousands of aliens watched in tense silence. Most of them expected the human to be dead within minutes. A few were taking bets on how long he would last. Look at him, whispered a slug-like creature to its companion. He's just standing there. Does he not understand the danger? Primitive. Species often freeze when faced with superior predators, replied another alien. It's an evolutionary response to overwhelming threat. But Dr. Brooks, watching from the front row, knew better. She could see the way Jake moved, the way he held his head to catch sounds and scents. He wasn't frozen with fear. He was hunting. The first attack came without warning. The alpha beast burst from the artificial bushes, like a living avalanche. Its massive form, moving with shocking speed for something so large. Its claws glinted in the arena lights as it swiped at where Jake had been standing just a moment before. But Jake wasn't there anymore. The crowd gasped as they saw the human roll sideways, moving with fluid grace that seemed impossible for such. A dense, heavy creature. The alpha beast's claws raked empty air, and its momentum carried it past Jake into the clearing dot. Jake came up from his roll in a crouch, studying his opponent for the first time face to face. The creature was even more terrifying in person than in the holographic images. Its shoulders were broader than a human was tall, and its head was the size of a small car. Saliva dripped from fangs that looked like curved daggers, and its eyes burned with predatory intelligence. But Jake had seen dangerous predators before. Earth had produced creatures just as deadly, and humans had learned to deal with all of them. The alpha beast turned to face him, lowering its massive head and rumbling deep in its throat. It was confused. Prey wasn't supposed to dodge its attacks. Everything on its homeworld either ran away or died immediately. Jake began to move, not away from the creature, but in a slow circle around it. His eyes never left the beast, but he was also mapping the terrain around them, noting the placement of rocks and trees that he could use to his advantage. The beast lunged again, this time trying to catch Jake with its massive jaws. But again, the human wasn't where the creature expected him to be. Jake had already moved, using a fallen log as a stepping stone to leap over the beast's head dot as he passed over the creature. Jake's hand slapped against the beast's skull, not hard enough to hurt it, but enough to let it know he had been there. The gesture was deliberate, calculated to make the creature angry and careless. It worked. The alpha beast roared in fury, a sound that shook the entire arena and sent several alien spectators scrambling for the exits. The creature spun around, its tail lashing and knocking down artificial trees like they were twigs. "What is that human doing?" demanded one of the Zephyrian council members. "Why doesn't he run?" "Because he can't," Veltar replied, though his lights were flickering with uncertainty. "There's nowhere to run. The arena is sealed." But Dr. Brooks knew the truth. Jake wasn't trying to escape. He was wearing the beast down, making it waste energy on attacks that couldn't hit him. It was a tactic as old as humanity itself. The alpha beast charged again, but this time Jake was ready. Instead of dodging to the side, he dropped flat to the ground and rolled directly under the creature's belly. The beast's claws scraped the ground where he had been, but Jake was already moving, coming up behind the creature's rear legs. For just a moment, Jake's hand touched the beast's ankle, feeling for the tendons and pressure points that would be the same on any four-legged creature. The alpha beast kicked backward, but Jake had already moved away. The crowd was beginning to murmur in confusion. This wasn't going the way they had expected. The human should have been dead by now, but instead he seemed to be studying the creature, learning its movements and weaknesses. "He's fast," Amy whispered, her hands clenched into fists as she watched her captain dance around the massive predator. "More than fast," Pete replied grimly. "He's thinking. Look at how he moves. He's not just avoiding the attacks. He's making the thing chase him in specific directions." Pete was right. Jake was using the terrain to his advantage, forcing the alpha beast to navigate around obstacles while he took the most direct routes. The creature was starting to breathe heavily, its massive frame not built for prolonged chases. On its homeworld, the alpha beast's hunts lasted minutes at most. Either it caught its prey immediately, or the prey escaped by running away. It had never faced something that stayed close, but remained untouchable. Jake vaulted over a large rock, and the alpha beast followed, its claws scraping against stone as it tried to climb over the obstacle. But where Jake had moved like water, the beast was clumsy and slow. The creature was getting frustrated now, its attacks becoming wilder and less controlled. It swiped at Jake with both front paws, trying to catch him between them, but Jake dropped to the ground and crawled between the beast's legs, coming up on the other side. This time, as he passed under the creature, Jake's hand found what he was looking for. Just behind the beast's front leg, there was a spot where the armored hide didn't quite meet, leaving a small gap. Jake's fingers pressed against it for just a moment, feeling the rapid pulse of the creature's heart. The alpha beast spun around faster than something that size should have been able to move, and its tail caught Jake across the chest. The impact sent him flying backward into an artificial tree, and he hit the ground hard. The crowd roared with excitement, thinking the fight was finally over. But Jake rolled to his feet immediately, shaking his head to clear it. His chest hurt, where the tail had hit him, but nothing was broken. The alpha beast charged again, thinking its prey was finally weakened. But Jake had been expecting this. As the creature's massive head came down toward him, Jake didn't dodge to the side. Instead, he stepped forward and to the right, moving inside the creature's reach. The beast's jaws snapped shut on empty air, and Jake was suddenly standing beside the creature's massive neck. For just a moment, he was close enough to touch the beast's throat, to feel the blood pulsing through the arteries beneath its armored hide. Then Jake was moving again, rolling away as the creature tried to shake him off. But he had learned what he needed to know. The alpha beast was powerful, but it had weaknesses, and Jake was beginning to understand exactly how to exploit them. The beast turned to face him again, but now there was something different in its eyes. For the first time in its life, the alpha beast was beginning to feel something it had never experienced before. Fear. Jake stood in the center of the clearing, his clothes torn and dirty, a thin line of blood running from a cut on his forehead. But his eyes were calm and focused, and there was something in his expression that made even the alien spectators feel uncomfortable. He looked like a predator who had just figured out how to catch his prey. The alpha beast backed away a step, its growl changing pitch. It was no longer the confident rumble of a dominant hunter. Now it sounded uncertain, almost questioning. Jake smiled, showing his teeth. The real hunt was about to begin. Jake circled the alpha beast slowly, and something fundamental had changed in his movements. The careful, measured steps of a diplomat were gone, replaced by something far older and more dangerous. His breathing had become deeper and more controlled, and his eyes had taken on a fixed, predatory stare that made the watching aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. The alpha beast could sense the change, too. It had stopped charging blindly, and now moved with the caution of a creature that had suddenly realized it might not be the top predator in this fight. Its massive head swayed back and forth, trying to track Jake's movements while also watching for threats from other directions. "Something's different," Amy whispered, leaning forward in her seat. "Look at the way the captain is moving now." Dr. Brooks nodded, her face pale. "He's not thinking like a civilized human anymore. He's thinking like our ancestors did when they hunted mammoths and saber-toothed tigers." In the Zephyrian section of the stands, Ambassador Veltar's lights were flickering rapidly with what could only be described as nervous energy. This wasn't going according to plan. The humans should have been dead by now, torn apart by the alpha beast's claws and teeth. Instead, the creature seemed to be growing more cautious with each passing moment. Jake suddenly changed direction, moving directly toward the alpha beast instead of circling it. The creature reared back on its hind legs, trying to bring its full weight down on the human, but Jake rolled forward between its legs and came up behind it. This time, instead of just touching the beast, Jake grabbed hold of its thick fur and swung himself up onto its back. The alpha beast roared and bucked like a wild horse, trying to throw him off. But Jake's grip was iron strong. The crowd gasped as they watched the small human cling to the massive predator. It looked impossible, like watching a child try to ride. A rhinoceros. But Jake wasn't just holding on randomly. His hands found specific points along the creature's spine, places where pressure would cause pain and confusion. The alpha beast spun in circles, crashed into artificial trees, and even rolled on its back, trying to crush Jake against the ground. But somehow the human stayed on, his body moving with the creature's thrashing like he was part of it. "How is he staying on that thing?" demanded a crab-like alien from the upper stands. "Humans are persistence hunters," Dr. Brooks explained too. The aliens around her, her voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet arena. "Our ancestors would chase prey for days, sometimes weeks, until it collapsed from exhaustion. We evolved to hold on and never let go." Jake's hands moved along the alpha beast's neck, feeling for the nerve clusters that would be the same on any vertebrate creature. The beast was becoming more frantic now, its movements less coordinated as panic began to set in. On its homeworld, nothing had ever climbed onto the alpha beast's back. It had no experience with this kind of attack, no instincts to deal with a predator that could cling to it like a parasite. While staying out of reach of its claws and teeth, Jake found what he was looking for. Just behind the creature's skull, there was a cluster of nerves that controlled balance and coordination. He pressed his thumbs against the spot, not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to make the beast stumble and lose its sense of direction. The alpha beast crashed into a large rock formation, and Jake used the impact to swing around to the creature's side. For a moment, he hung from the beast's neck like a living necklace, his feet dangling just inches from the ground. The creature tried to grab him with its jaws, but Jake was already moving again. He swung his legs up and wrapped them around the beast's throat, his arms still holding tight to its fur. Now he was in a position that would have been instantly fatal against a human opponent, but the alpha beast's thick neck and armored hide made it merely uncomfortable rather than deadly. Still, the creature could feel the pressure against its windpipe, and for the first time in its life, it experienced the sensation of being choked. It bucked and twisted with renewed desperation, but Jake held on with the determination of someone who knew that letting go meant certain death. The spectators watched in stunned silence as the human slowly, methodically began to wear down the massive predator. What had started as a showcase of alien superiority was turning into something very different. "This is impossible," Veltar said, his lights flickering so rapidly it looked like a strobe. "The alpha beast has never been defeated. It's the apex predator of our world." "Maybe it was the apex predator on your world," Pete replied grimly, "but it never met anything from Earth before." The alpha beast made one final, desperate attempt to dislodge Jake. It reared up on its hind legs and threw itself backward, trying to crush the human against the arena wall. But Jake saw it coming and used his grip on the creature's fur to swing himself up and over its head as the beast crashed into the wall. Jake landed on its snout, his feet planted firmly on either side of its massive nostrils. The alpha beast's eyes, each one the size of a dinner plate, stared up at him with an expression that could only be described as shock. For a moment, predator and prey stared at each other. Then Jake did something that made every alien in the arena gasp in horror. He smiled. It wasn't the polite, diplomatic smile he had worn during the negotiations. It was the smile of a hunter who had cornered his prey, the expression of someone who had just realized that victory was within his grasp. The alpha beast tried to shake its head, but Jake's weight and position made it difficult. The creature's breathing was labored now, and its movements were becoming sluggish. The long chase and the stress of fighting an opponent it couldn't understand were taking their toll. Jake slid down from the creature's snout and landed lightly on the ground. In front of it, the alpha beast tried to swipe at him with one massive paw, but the attack was slow and clumsy. Jake stepped aside easily, and then did something that shocked everyone watching. He stepped forward and placed his hand gently on the creature's snout. Alpha beast froze, its eyes wide with confusion. In all its years as the dominant predator on its world, nothing had ever touched it gently. Everything either fled from it or fought desperately for its life. This casual, almost affectionate gesture was completely outside its experience. "You're tired, aren't you?" Jake said softly, his voice carrying clearly in the silent arena. "You've never had to fight for this long before. Everything on your world either died quickly or ran away." The creature's breathing was heavy and ragged. Foam dripped from its jaws, and its legs trembled with exhaustion. It had used up energy reserves that were never meant to be depleted. Jake walked slowly around the creature, staying just out of reach, but close enough to touch. The alpha beast's head followed his movement, but it no longer tried to attack. It was too tired, too confused by this strange opponent who refused to behave like proper prey. "The problem with being the apex predator," Jake continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone that made the watching aliens lean forward to hear, "is that you never learn what to do when you meet something that's not afraid of you." The creature tried to roar, but all that came out was a tired wheeze. Its legs finally gave out, and it collapsed to the ground with a thud that shook the entire arena. Jake stood over the fallen beast, his hand resting on its massive head. The alpha beast's eyes were still open, still intelligent, but they no longer held the confident gaze of a supreme predator. They held something that had never been there before: respect. "On Earth," Jake said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the arena, "we have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight that matters. It's the size of the fight in the dog." He looked up at the spectator stands, his eyes finding Ambassador Valtar's glowing form. The alien's lights were pulsing erratically, and Jake could see fear in the way the crystalline being held himself. "Your alpha beast is magnificent," Jake continued. "It's strong, fast, and intelligent. But it never learned to fight smart, because it never had to. It's been the biggest predator in its world for so long that it forgot there might be something out there that could match it." Jake's hand moved to the spot on the creature's throat where he had felt its pulse earlier. The alpha beast's eyes followed his movement, and Jake could see that it understood what he was saying. "I could kill you right now," Jake said quietly. "I know exactly where to press to crush your windpipe. I know how to find the arteries that feed your brain. I know pressure points that would paralyze you instantly." The creature's eyes never left Jake's face. It was listening, understanding, perhaps for the first time in its life, what it felt like to be prey. "But I'm not going to kill you," Jake said, his voice gentling, "because you're not evil. You're just what your world made you. And now you know that there are things in this galaxy that your world didn't prepare you for." Jake stepped back from the creature and looked up at the stands. The arena was so quiet that he could hear the whisper of the artificial wind through the fake trees. "The question is," he called out to the watching aliens, "what are you going to do with that knowledge?" The silence in the arena stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Thousands of alien eyes stared down at the human standing calmly beside the defeated alpha beast. Jake's uniform was torn and dirty. Sweat ran down his face, and there was blood from several small cuts. But he stood straight and relaxed, like he had just finished a pleasant morning jog. The alpha beast lay on its side, breathing heavily but alive. Its massive eyes were fixed on Jake with an expression that no one in the arena had ever seen before. The apex predator of the Zephyrian homeworld was looking at something with complete and total respect. Ambassador Valtar was the first to break the silence. His crystalline body had gone completely dark, except for small, rapidly flickering lights that betrayed his shock and fear. "This is impossible," he said, his electronic voice carrying clearly through the arena's amplification system. "The Alpha Beast has never been defeated. Not by our finest mechanical warriors, not by our most advanced weapons. How did a primitive human accomplish what our entire civilization could not?" Jake looked up at the Zephyrian section of the stands. His eyes were calm, but there was something in them that made several aliens step back from the viewing rail. "Maybe the question you should be asking," Jake said, his voice carrying easily through the arena, "is whether we're really as primitive as you thought." He walked slowly toward the center of the arena, his hand trailing along the Alpha Beast's flank. The creature's eyes followed him, but it made no move to attack. If anything, it seemed almost protective of the human who had defeated it. "Your Alpha Beast is magnificent," Jake continued, addressing the entire crowd now. "It's perfectly designed for its world. Strong, fast, intelligent. But it has one weakness that your comfortable civilization never prepared it for." Jake stopped and turned to face the spectator stands directly. "It never learned that sometimes the prey fights back." In the front row, Dr. Brooks was watching Jake with growing concern. She had seen this look before, in the eyes of humans who had been pushed too far and were about to push back. The civilized diplomat was still there, but something much older and more dangerous was rising to the surface. "You want to know what humans are?" Jake asked, his voice getting stronger. "Let me tell you what we are. We're the species that looked at mammoths and decided they looked tasty. We're the ones who saw saber-toothed tigers and thought they would make nice rugs. We turned wolves into pets and made tools out of our enemies' bones." The crowd was shifting uncomfortably now. Several aliens were moving toward the exits, but most seemed frozen in place by Jake's words. "We didn't evolve on a nice, safe world like yours," Jake continued. "Earth tried to kill us every single day. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, floods, droughts, plagues, and predators that could tear us apart without even trying. And you know what we did?" Jake spread his arms wide, addressing the entire arena. "We survived. We adapted. We learned. And we turned the world that wanted us dead into our home." Ambassador Veltar's lights were flickering frantically now. "This proves exactly what we said about humans. You are violent, primitive creatures who... What?" Jake interrupted, his voice cutting through the alien's words like a blade. "Who don't know our place? Who won't bow down and accept being your manual laborers? Who might actually be able to stand as your equals?" The Alpha Beast stirred slightly, and Jake placed his hand on its head again. The massive creature settled immediately, its eyes never leaving Jake's face. "You created this test because you wanted to humiliate us," Jake said. "You wanted to prove that humans were nothing more than dumb animals fit only for heavy lifting. You brought out your ultimate predator and expected it to tear me apart in minutes." Jake's voice was getting harder now, with an edge that made even his own crew members nervous. "But that's not what happened, is it? Instead, you got to watch a primitive human defeat your apex predator without using any weapons, any technology, or any advantages except the ones that evolution gave him." The arena was completely silent, except for the sound of the Alpha Beasts' heavy breathing and the whisper of artificial wind through the fake trees. "So now you have a choice," Jake continued. "You can accept that maybe, just maybe, humans deserve a seat at your civilized table. Or you can keep making excuses and pretending that what you just saw didn't happen." Veltar's entire body was flickering, like a broken light now. "Even if you defeated the Alpha Beast, that doesn't change what you are. Humans are still violent, unpredictable, dangerous. Yes, we are," Jake said simply, and his calm agreement sent a chill through the crowd. We're very dangerous. The question is, do you want us as friends or enemies? The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Jake hadn't raised his voice or made any aggressive gestures, but every alien in the arena suddenly understood that they were looking at something that could be far more dangerous, and the alpha beast. Dr. Brooks stood up in the front row. What Captain Morrison is trying to say, she called out, is that humans can be both civilized and capable of defending themselves. We didn't come here to threaten anyone. We came hoping to join the galactic community as partners. Partners, repeated a slug-like creature from the upper stands. What kind of partners would humans make? What could your species possibly offer that we cannot provide for ourselves? Jake smiled, and several aliens instinctively moved away from the viewing rails. We can offer you something that your comfortable worlds have never taught you, he said. We can teach you how to survive when survival isn't guaranteed. He gestured toward the alpha beast, which was now sitting up, its massive head tilted as it listened to Jake's words. Your strongest predator just learned that there are things in this galaxy it never imagined. What happens when your people encounter something even more dangerous? What happens when you meet a species that isn't interested in being civilized? The crowd murmured uneasily. Several alien species had been expanding aggressively in recent years, and there were rumors of conflicts in the outer systems. Humans have been fighting for survival since before we had language, Jake continued. We faced extinction dozens of times and kept going. We fought wars that lasted centuries and still found ways to make peace. We've survived plagues that killed half our population and came back stronger. Jake's voice softened slightly. We don't want to fight you. We want to stand beside you. But we won't be your servants, and we won't pretend to be something we're not just to make you comfortable. Ambassador Veltar had gone completely dark, except for a few dim lights around his edges. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. What ... What do you want from us? Recognition? Jake said simply. Respect, the same rights and privileges you give to any other spacefaring species. Trade agreements, cultural exchange, mutual defense pacts if needed. And if we refuse? Ask the tree-like alien. Jake looked directly at it, his expression neutral, but his eyes holding depths that hadn't been there before the fight. Then we go home, build our own ships, make our own way in the galaxy, and hope we never meet under less friendly circumstances. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Humans would prefer to be allies, but they were perfectly capable of being something else entirely. A new voice spoke from the upper stands. It belonged to a reptilian creature that Jake hadn't noticed before. The human speaks truth, it said, in a hissing voice. My people have encountered aggressive species before. We learned the value of having strong allies. Other voices began to join in, aliens speaking up in support of giving humans a chance. Not all of them, but enough to matter. Veltar. Lights began to pulse in a slow, steady rhythm that Jake recognized as deep thought. Finally, the crystalline alien spoke. The Zephyrian Council will reconsider our position regarding humanity, he said carefully. Perhaps we were too hasty in our initial assessment. Jake nodded and walked back to the alpha beast, the massive creature lowered its head, and Jake scratched behind its ears like it was an oversized dog. The gesture sent a ripple of amazement through the crowd. Thank you, Jake said to the beast quietly. You taught me something important today. Sometimes the best way to make friends is to show them what you're capable of. The alpha beast rumbled softly, a sound that was almost like purring. Then it stood up, towering over Jake once more, but now there was no threat in its posture. It looked around the arena one last time, then walked calmly back toward the gate that led to its holding area. Jake turned to face the crowd one final time. The United Earth government looks forward to a long and peaceful relationship with all the species of the galactic community," he said formally. "We hope that today's demonstration has helped clear up any misunderstandings about human capabilities." As he walked toward the exit where his crew was waiting, Jake could hear the excited chatter of thousands of aliens discussing what they had just witnessed. The story would spread throughout the galaxy within days, carried by traders and diplomats. To every civilized world, Amy, Pete, and Dr. Brooks met him at the arena exit. They all looked shaken but proud. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "I think you just changed the course of human history." Jake looked back at the arena one last time, then smiled at his crew. "Let's go home," he said. "We have a lot of work to do."